Welcome to the first Kern High School District podcast. I'm Stan Greene, Director of School Support Services, and today I have Dr. Bryon Schaefer, the exiting superintendent of the Kern High School District. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Stan. This is the first one.
Maybe the last. Depends what happens. So Bryon has always been good to me and a funny guy, and I always joke about how we never should have worked together because we'd have been big trouble.
That's true.
I want to start back with, obviously when you go to retire, there's a lot of reflection. And I'd like to go back to your childhood. So maybe high school, because you're the exiting superintendent. Was it 8, 9, 10 years? What was it, 12 years?
It'll be 9 and a little over 9.5.
Okay, 9.5 years, exiting superintendent of the largest high school district in the state of California, which is obviously a time period in our lives that really forms us.
Yeah.
So go back to your childhood. Tell me about your childhood. Where are you from?
I'm from a small town called Olivet, South Dakota, and I was just back there a little over a month ago, and it's now down to population 63. So at the time, it was right around 100, I think, back in when I grew up. I was born in 1964, and really that's up until I graduated from high school, that's about where I lived. And so it's different when I say, people say, well, I'm from a small town like Schaefer. Well, now Schaefer's a big city. So it was a different existence.
Okay, so all of it's not spelled like all of it, right?
No, but I'll say that. No, it's Olivet.
Okay. So 63 people live there now.
Correct.
100 when you grew up.
Yep.
Did all of it have a high school or one building, or did you go somewhere else?
I went somewhere else. They did have a school, because you got to remember there's farming communities around and all. But I went to the big city of Menno, South Dakota for school, which was 5 miles away. And I went there K through 12. So when I graduated from high school, there was a graduating class of 26.
Oh my goodness! It was K through 12 all in the same building then?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Did you play any sports or extracurriculars?
Yeah. It's really, in a small town environment like that, there are so many opportunities. Little league baseball, but we didn't have high school sports. There were high school sports. There wasn't baseball because the winter lasts so long. So it was junior. It was Pee-wee, midget, teener, and junior legion was the baseball setup. But between my 8th grade and freshman year, I grew about 6 inches. So I went from being one of the smaller kids to I was a power forward. So, it's a really great place to be from. It's when I went back the other day, or the other month, there's still one lady there that was very instrumental in my life. My dad was a long haul truck driver, so he was home one day a week, maybe 2, and my mom died when I was 16. So from the end of my sophomore year and then junior and senior year, for the most part, I lived alone, but a bunch of those ladies around there, they could cook. And I'd get home from sports or whatever, and there'd always be food in the refrigerator or in the oven. So I went back, and there's one lady still alive.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Okay, so Menno High School.
Home of the Wolves.
The Menno Wolves.
Yep.
All right. And you were a power forward. You played basketball then?
Yeah. It's, again, because of the small atmosphere, if music is your thing, you're in the top choir. If, the school had a band. It's kind of sad now because the towns are getting even smaller, so those small towns are consolidating. It's upwards like 30 miles away. But in those small towns, the high school is the action. It's the community gathering point. Football is in most of the schools, the small schools, it's 9-man football, which, you being a football guy, you understand. They don't have the tackles, and so you can spread the field and go.
Yeah.
So if you have that one fast player, you're in really good shape. But in the winter, basketball is king, and so it's a cool experience. And I don't, we didn't have a huge career technical education program. Ag was the main one of all those schools, but it's a different upbringing. Obviously, they still don't lock their cars back there.
No, they don't. It's interesting how the small towns are kind of disappearing, though, because that's going on in upstate New York where my dad lives.
Yeah.
They're worried they're going to have to close their school.
Yep.
Okay, so Minnow High School, did you play all 4 years basketball?
Yep.
Did you do any other sports or just basketball?
Just basketball and baseball.
Okay. So, baseball, too.
Well, because everybody played baseball in the summer. Okay. That was just...
What position?
Well, it depended on the age level. As I grew, I was an infielder. Then when I got taller, I was a pitcher. I was actually surprised myself. I was pretty good, but the curveball got me, both hitting and throwing it.
I feel it. I feel your pain.
Yep.
So finish your high school years.
Yep.
And you put on your college resume, graduated top 25 of my class.
Absolutely.
Didn't include anything else.
Nope.
All right. So where did you go to college?
I went to the University of South Dakota. And it's really back there in those small towns, graduating class of 26. When you graduated, a lot of the guys just worked with their dad on the farm. But even then, college was really pushed in those small towns. Education was a priority. There was never a doubt that I was going to go to college. That was just expected. But went to the University of South Dakota. When right at the end of my senior year, I met this girl from a town about 16 miles away. I always describe it as I went to North High and she went to Centennial. But we were rivals, and so she wouldn't leave.
Is this Beth?
That is Beth.
Okay,
That's
all right. Well, that was where I was going to go next. All right, so you met Beth at the University of South Dakota.
Well, I actually met her in high school,
okay.
and she was a sophomore. I was a senior. She was a sophomore, and we never broke up. Well, kind of like you and Amy.
Yeah.
You were high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I went to college. I was going to be a computer science major, and if I'd have stayed in that, I'd be so rich I couldn't talk to you. But
so true.
40 years ago. But I didn't like it. Obviously computer science was way different than it is now. I didn't like it because you were secluded. You had to go to a computer lab. No one had a laptop or anything like that. So I decided because of computer science, I had all these math classes, and I always wanted to coach. And I figured being a math teacher, somebody would pick me up. So I switched majors. And then at the end of my second year of college, she graduated from high school and we got married. And so that was my third year. And then we figured out that we couldn't live on love and we didn't have enough money. So I finished the 4 years in 3.
Oh, wow.
So I'm 21, she's 19. I graduated with a degree in math education. And then I was like, boy, what are we going to do now? And at the time, South Dakota then, and honestly to this day, still don't pay their teachers very well. And I just hate the snow. I can't handle the cold. And so my brother lived here in Bakersfield, adjacent to West High, actually. And he worked for Schlumberger Oil Company, which is still oil well services. It's still here. And we moved here, and what they do from California, and we don't do it quite as much as what used to happen, is all these school districts would come back to South Dakota in the dead of winter when we've got 10-degree weather and all this snow, and they show you pictures of Fraser Park, or and then they try to tell you that Bakersfield is just like, or just like Fraser Park, and so then it's just like South Dakota. But I'd been out here because my brother had been here for a few years. So when a gentleman named Tom Good was the director of personnel at the time, and matter of fact, I saw Tom at the gym the other day, and we reminisced. And
I remember him.
He's a great man.
Yep.
And he started the spiel of Bakersfield has an average temperature of 72, and I said, Mr. Good, I'm sorry, but I've been there where it's 110. So
was that numbers lie and liars use numbers?
That's right.
So Tom Good, was he in South Dakota? Did he come recruit you
no,
there, or were you here?
I came here,
Okay.
But I talked to him on the phone a couple times.
Okay.
And you have to remember, there's no internet then, and so it was probably easier to recruit with whatever story you wanted to tell. But I came here. I did have a job offer up in Fairfield.
Okay.
And so we got a U-Haul and moved out here. And the plan was to give it a week. And this was in May. Give it a week and see if I could find a job here in Bakersfield. And if I couldn't, we'd have probably gone to Fairfield with the job that was in hand. And I didn't know anything about Fairfield. I've since been there, but so Tom said, well, we're a little early. And I said, well, I'm leaving here soon. And he said, well, we may have two schools. So he gave me a choice of West and East. And, years ago, well, where we're sitting today on Sundale, that was kind of the outer parts of Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And living next to West, and all of my brother's friends said how great West is, and to this day, West is best, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom said, would you please just go to East and just visit? And if you don't want to go to East, the West High job offer is there. And I went to East, and there was a principal named Gene Philippe, who was an East High graduate, and he was very proud of it. I found out later he was actually the East High ASB president, and he sold his school. I kind of liked him. He was matter of fact. But the assistant principal of administration at the time was a man named Randy Gruber, who Randy ended his career as the Stockdale principal years ago. And Randy was from Wyoming. And so he did the Wyoming thing, I did the South Dakota thing, and we really hit it off. And I called Mr. Good back and said, I'll go to East. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So how many years did you teach math at East then?
6. And it was, you think about it. Olivet, South Dakota, population 90-ish probably at the time, to East Bakersfield High School. That was just a touch of a culture shock.
Yeah, you went from 90 people in your town to 90 people in your first 3 classes.
That's right. It was so cool though, and the administration at the time did such a wonderful job of. They still call it the East High family, and that has gone on through the years. More recently through Leo Holland and Carla Stallworth. They still do that, but there's such a history there. And at the time, there was just some phenomenal teachers. The best teacher I've ever worked with or ever seen was a lady named Margaret DeArmond, who was the math department chair at the time. And she's the one that taught me this is what you need to do as a teacher. And so I still remember the things Maggie said.
That's awesome. I feel like, did she go to the county or to Cal State? I've heard her name.
Yeah, she's done in-services through the years. And
okay. So was Mr. Gruber a math teacher as well?
No, he was a shop teacher, actually.
Really?
But
that makes sense because I heard stories about him building the stadium at Stockdale.
Those are true stories.
Wow.
So when 6 years at East, Randy Gruber had left East, and he went to North and then went to Stockdale as the first assistant principal when this school was being built. And quite honestly, I followed Randy from East to Stockdale because I had so much respect for him. And and I tell new teachers all the time, veteran teachers, if you ever have an opportunity to open a school, that's a really neat thing. And so that was fun. So I went to Stockdale with Randy.
So he went from, was he a teacher? He was a shop teacher at East.
And then he was a dean and assistant principal of admin at East.
Okay.
After being a shop teacher at
Okay.
East. Then he went to North as the assistant principal of instruction.
Okay.
And then he went to Stockdale as the assistant principal. Back then when we opened new schools, you only had one assistant principal the first year.
Who was the principal at Open Stockdale? I forget.
Janine Thompson.
That's right.
She had come from South.
All right. And so then you made that connection from, hey, I worked with this guy at East High, and he's, hey, I'm at Stockdale at a new school. You want to come over?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't think our administrators poach teachers from each other. I don't.
Never happens. Coaches, teachers, that doesn't go on.
Right.
So when you went to Stockdale, you were teaching math.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so 6 years at East, you go to Stockdale, you're teaching math. How many more, at what point did you decide, I'm a leader here, I want to go into administration? I mean, clearly, I don't even need to ask you who your mentor was, right?
Right. It was Randy. When you got to remember, when you move from out of state, you don't have any credits toward career advancement, toward salary schedule advancement.
Right.
Also, back then, there was very little reciprocity, so out-of-state teachers had to do a little more work. So, and then they called it the second tier or something like that at the time. I don't think that's the correct terminology, but you had to do more coursework. So Randy told me, if you have to go do all this coursework anyway, you might as well get a master's in admin. So Randy is the one that helped. And again, there were so many veteran teachers at East who were so helpful in my life. It's really neat to look back at all these people who treated a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old so well.
Yeah.
There's a math teacher at East at the time named Fred Gonzalez. I believe you worked with his wife, Irene, at BHS.
Yeah.
And they took us into their family. And Fred's the one that introduced me to a 403B and mutual funds. And so, he also said, hey, you have to go get your admin master's, admin credential along with a master's. But again, because of, Gene Philippe and Randy and Bill Hatcher, who became superintendent, was the assistant principal of instruction at the time. So I had a lot of mentors. They weren't necessarily vocal, but I'd just watch them and say, okay, that's what you need to do. And then Margaret, as the math department chair, the just innovative things 35 plus years ago that she was doing, that was pretty neat too.
So, you just basically mentioned the all-star team, right? Hatcher and Gruber and DeArmond and Fred Gonzalez and Irene, just great people.
Yeah, that's really cool. You said great people. Because we were young and, obviously new teacher and, Beth worked as a bank teller at the time. It's not like we were rolling in money, but we had all these veterans that, our family were 1,600 miles away and Thanksgiving rolled along and we were at their house. Yeah. So it was really great.
It's really important when you get in to get around the right people.
Yep.
Because if you don't, it's painful.
Yep. And we did. We were so fortunate.
So did you coach at all when you came?
So my goal was I wanted to be like you. I wanted to coach and I wanted to be, and I don't know if it was all the work I did to get 3 years of college done, 4 years and 3 years. Mm-hmm. But I went to spring practice, because we got here in May and it was hot already in Bakersfield. And, and then I wasn't really wanting to coach. And every once in a while, there was a man who was the athletic director at the time named Hollis Shannon. And he knew that I knew enough about sports. So if he needed JV girls softball, I was his guy. But I never coached a down of football. And my whole career goal is I wanted to be this great football coach.
Yeah.
And honestly, I did very little basketball. I played with the kids because I was still in decent enough shape then to play with them. But I did very little coaching.
Isn't that funny how that plays out?
Yeah.
I want to coach for 35 years. That's all I want to do. Mm-hmm. And then you turn around, you're in administration.
Yeah. And I think probably that background that I had really helped me when I became a principal. I could feel the pain these coaches had. And you always talk about, a coach being a player's coach. I think I was a coach's administrator.
Oh yeah, you were. That was your reputation.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah. Because I knew what they were going through.
Yeah. Okay, so Stockdale High School math teacher for Janine Thompson, and Randy Gruber's the assistant principal. You said 1 year?
Yep.
And you took your admin classes, and so then what did you do then?
So I had interviewed for dean's jobs, and I tell this to new deans or teachers wanting to be a new dean. I'm the wrong guy to come and want for me to console you if you don't get a job, because I was passed up 13 times for a dean's job. And looking back, I'm glad I was. But God works in mysterious ways, because late in the hiring season, like a week before the school year started, there was a gentleman named Dave Olds who was the North High dean, and he had been named to be the assistant principal at Centennial. And for whatever reason, the district decided that rather late in the game. And so there was the North High dean's job opened very late. And I think that probably worked to my benefit, because there weren't that many applicants at the time. And also Randy Gruber had been at North High, and he said nice things to me, to the principal at the time, a guy named Bill Bemat. And so to be very candid, about the only school I didn't want to go be the dean of was North High. I'd heard all these things, and I didn't want to go to North. But Randy told me, hey, you need to apply. Well, I didn't know at the time that there had been discussions. And so Janine Thompson and Randy Gruber were gracious enough to let a math teacher go that close to the beginning of the school year, and I went to North.
So that had to be what, 93-ish?
92.
Okay, so 92, you're the dean at North High.
Yep.
And how many years were you dean?
1.
1 year's dean, and then what happened?
And then there was a longtime coach, athletic director, assistant principal of admin named Lloyd Williams, who retired, and I was promoted to assistant principal of admin. And then 2.5 years later, I lateraled to the assistant principal of instruction. So I did both AP jobs.
And so how long were you AP?
Total of 5 years.
Okay. And then in 1998, I became principal of North High. It was sad times at North. In December of 94, Bill Bemat died as the principal of North, and a gentleman named Jim Wren came in, and Jim was exactly what the staff needed at the time. He brought the staff together. He really modeled for me how you have to make sure your classified staff is included in everything that you do at the school. And between Bill was just a phenomenal instructional mind, and Jim was so great with staff. I had a bird's eye view for 6 years of how to do it right. Oh, wow. And so you were principal then at North High for
12 years.
Okay, so that's about 2010 is when you came down. That's when I came down here.
Yeah.
I interviewed with little fact right here. I interviewed with Dr. Schaefer for an AP job. Remember, you had both of them open.
Yeah, You messed up the interview, Stan.
I know I did too. I did. Do you remember what the question was?
Yeah, we asked you
Which
job do you want? Stan wasn't reading the tea leaves.
No, I wasn't. You had to hit me over the head with a hammer to figure it out. That was so. I remember that too. I remember I got home and how'd the interview go? I said, pretty sure I'm not getting hired. Why? Well, he asked me which job I'd want, and I told him. Shouldn't have said that. I think it worked out all right for me.
Yes, it did.
Okay, so 2010, you came down here. Were you in business or HR? You were in HR.
Business for the first year.
Business for the first year.
And then HR for 3, because I don't think it had ever happened before in the history of the district, or the recent history anyway. Joe Thompson and Bill Jones. Joe was the assistant superintendent of instruction, and Bill was HR. They both retired at the same time.
That's right.
So the then superintendent, Don Carter, asked me if I'd be interested in going into a lateral to personnel or human resources.
Which is probably the smartest thing you could have done, right? Gives you all sorts of experience.
Well, it gives you all sorts of experience, but when I speak to community groups, I said, would you rather deal with numbers who don't talk back, or HR where everybody's got an opinion? But
I'm going to take numbers.
But no, you're right. It was a great learning experience. And you think about Mike Zolfa taking over here. That man has led all 3 divisions. Yeah. There's no one in the district who is more prepared to be superintendent than somebody who's run every division.
Yeah, he might be podcast 2.
There you go.
Or 3. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Put him down.
All right, so let's go back to 9 years or 9 point whatever years as the superintendent of the largest high school district in the state of California. How was that?
Well, you and I could sit here and talk about all the bad things that we deal with on a daily basis. Of
course.
But it's interesting to me. I highly recommend to administrators that announce your retirement a few months before you go, because honestly, it gives you a chance to reflect. If I hadn't announced my retirement, you and I may not even be sitting here today doing this.
Yeah.
But as I look back, it's all the people. It's, think of the hours that you and I have spent together.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about life. We've talked about death. But we laugh. And in these jobs, if you can't find some sort of humor during your day, I don't know how you live.
Yeah.
And you're very good at that. But you think about the amount of people just in this building. We work with some really great people.
Yeah, we do.
And I think that's the thing but people say, well, are you going to miss this? I'll miss some people, but life goes on. It's time for someone else to take over.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. I was the North High principal for 12 years, and I'm then being the superintendent for over 9. I've been able to build lifelong relationships with people just because of the longevity. One thing I'm very proud of is I've had 7 administrative jobs, and I've only had 5 secretaries. So,
wow.
Some of our assistant principals out there have already had 5 secretaries in their career. So I always take secretaries with me, or they put up with me.
I think you're a pretty good guy, so I think you're safe. All right, so this is a tough question because I guess you never really know, right? Like, so what do you? They want me to ask you this question, so I'll go ahead and ask you. I think we might have covered it.
Are we blaming these people?
Yeah, they wanted me to ask it. Al wanted to get really deep, and I go, we're not going that deep, buddy. We're not doing that. The most challenging thing that you have faced, or let me make it a little bit easier for you. The biggest change that you've seen.
Well, probably the most challenging is, and I think teachers. I always when I would teach credentialing classes to new teachers, I tell them, when you walk in the door, and let's say you're fortunate, you have a class size of just 30, but you've probably got a few more than 30, and you walk in, there's a couple of kids in there right off the bat, they don't like you and they don't trust you because of their past experiences. And at first that was really, really hard for me as a teacher. It's like, come on, buddy, I'm here to help you, and I'm giving you every break in the book, and you couldn't get, sometimes you get through that rough exterior, but most of the time it's really difficult. So then when I started out as the dean at North, I realized, well, there's some teachers that flat out don't like me. And I'm a great guy, just ask me. And that's hard. And I see it now with our newer administrators struggle with that. Well, it doesn't matter what job you have in the organization, there are people that for whatever experiences they've had, they don't like you.
Yep.
And I've come to be comfortable enough in that, that I can't base my life off of what individuals necessarily feel. But it does bother me when I know, and you know, all of the great programs we have for kids and all of these, thousands of adults who are there to help these kids succeed, and these adults don't get credit for it. But it goes back to there's a certain percentage that
doesn't matter what you do.
So one of the great things that you've done is at the Kern High Network and the Achieve magazine, you tell our story. But even with that effort, there's some people that just don't accept that, the vast majority of all people in education want the best for these kids, no matter what their lot in life is. So that I've never gotten totally comfortable with that aspect of it. Now, think about Stan, the things that you and I do together, we've probably dealt with 500 issues. Most of them get resolved. Most of them are happy. Some can't be.
Yeah.
But again, you can't let that stuff get you down.
Yeah. And we just talked about that the other day.
Yeah.
We just got to be able to roll with it. And, it is what it is.
Yeah. And people want to know what really happens. Well, legally, we can't divulge that.
Yeah.
Do I agree with everything that comes from Sacramento? Of course not.
Yeah.
But by and large, again, you got to announce early.
68 months.
There you go. Somebody told me the other day he's got 10 years. I said, don't announce it that early.
Yeah.
But if you do that, you do take in, you talk to people about things.
Yeah.
Like today, for example, we did an Alpha Kappa Alpha luncheon honoring our African-American scholars. And we talked about the kids, and then afterwards 7 or 8 of us were standing around, and they said, Bryon, that was really great, 9 years ago when you came up with this idea, and that was kind of neat.
Oh yeah.
But if I wouldn't have, if you announce that you're retiring next week, I don't think you have the time to truly appreciate what people do for you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
So
a minute ago, I said I'm going to ask you a tough question, and this is a tough question, I think, because it's really hard to reflect on it. So what is your legacy going to be? And sometimes I think your legacy is your legacy. You don't get to say, you know what I mean? It's kind of a hard question.
So the other day in our PIP group, Ryan Guyvett, the Foothill principal, said, you can be a legend and you can have a legacy, but you probably should concentrate on the legacy. Because if it's all about you being a legend, that's not cool. But the legacy for me, what I'm probably most proud of, is all of the people that I've had an influence on, be it part of their promotion, be it hey, maybe you should look out for this. I think that will live on most in my mind. When I walk through this building, I know people. That I want that to be my legacy. The people that are going to continue the work. Individual programs. You think about what we've done with career technical education and with dual enrollment. Over 100,000 credits given out to kids in the last 8-9 years. But that's not me. That's those teachers at CTEC and ROC and on our campuses. That is just phenomenal. When Dean McGee and I first talked about how are we going to make sure that CTE keeps moving, well, within 15 minutes, we said we got to build a building. Because if you build the building, it's really hard to take the programs away. Now, I don't think either one of us or anybody involved in that ever thought that we'd have the programs we have. But that's not me at all. That's just being smart enough to get out of the way of certain people. The board did it. The voters passed a bond. There was a whole lot of things that went together. But I think that what I want is when I walk out, it's like he was a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
He treated me fair. I didn't agree with him necessarily all the time, but again, there's some people that don't agree with that. So it's not really a difficult question at all. It's if you can get out of your own way. I think you told me once, or other coaches, when you win, it's the players. When you lose, it's the coach. And even though I never coached a down of football like you did, I've kept that attitude.
Well, I think anytime you're a leader, you're coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, you just are, and you've done a great job of empowering the people around you, and getting out of the way when need be, and providing support. That's what I think, and I think walking through the building, you are one of the most personable people I've ever worked with. Right. Where people.
Yeah, I try, and part of that is probably moving here from small town South Dakota and not having. I had no one. I hear principals talk about, well, I walked in as the principal of this school, and I really didn't know many people. Well, Beth and I had changed our life, and we had my brother here for a couple of years before he left. But, if we'd have been a jerk, we'd have never met anyone. Heck, I even like Javi.
Well, it's funny, too, because I sit here and I think, the conversation and just the importance of the right circle.
Mm-hmm.
How important that is. I mean, all the people we talked about in the beginning, I worked with Irene, and I know Fred, and just fantastic people.
Right.
Well,
one of the things I do, I think I do this fairly well, and it's a sign of age too, is I've got Kern High School District stories. The other day, for example, Jim Foster, who was a longtime administrator at BHS, he died. And Will Sandoval was saying, he worked with my dad at BHS.
Oh, wow.
I'm one of the few people in the building that remembers what a great man Jim Foster was. So I think storytelling keeps it going.
Yeah. Well, and that was the idea behind this. We bought this equipment in the middle of COVID.
I remember that.
Because, we thought, we got to do something. And then it just kind of fizzled out. And then, with you announcing your retirement, it was one of those things where we talked about it. I said, we have to start getting our people on tape so we can archive it. So in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, someone says, remember Bryon Schaefer? And some 25-year-old or 30-year-old administrator says, no, I don't know who that is. Go to podcast 1 and look at it. It's so important.
That's really a neat thing. It's funny. I don't remember how many years ago, but I invited back everyone who had retired at a principal or superintendent level to attend what's now called the Administrative Summit. And I invited them back. We did it at the Ag Pavilion, and Megan Greger was down here in public information at the time, and she made a video of all of those people.
That's right. I remember that.
And I've had so many people since come up to me and basically say, well, I thought it was a stupid idea at the time, but now I get it.
Yeah.
Because, we do have a long history in this district of internal promotion. Just a couple of years ago when PAC went through looking at our district values, the principals really didn't change much of our values. We, you and I are prime examples. We didn't grow up here.
Yeah.
But we've bought in.
Yeah.
And it's the people who tell the story.
Yeah. So important. It's kind of funny. It's a reflection of it all.
It is. But again, that's what I'm going through right now. And I'm it was a sad time, but when Bill Beamat died as the North High principal, you talk about a whole community. Bill graduated from North High School. He grew up around that area. He was a great teacher, coach, administrator, and he was gone. But you know what? What happened over Christmas break? But when we came back from Christmas break, the doors opened. Yeah. And, it doesn't matter that long who were in these chairs. We're only in it for about a moment.
Yeah.
But what keeps going is, Mike Zolf is now in charge. There's going to be a new assistant superintendent named. There will then be a new principal named. And it just keeps going down. There's going to be a new dean that's going to come out of my retirement. Yeah. And then there's going to be a new teacher that replaces that dean. It's kind of a neat thing if you sit there and think about it. We're just all part of we play a role.
Yeah.
And then it's time for the next.
Pass the torch.
Yeah.
So what's the next chapter? You got Beth at home, who's retired. You got your 2 daughters and a grandbaby.
Yeah, I think that grandbaby is a little more important than those 2 daughters. So let's get it in order now. So Beth retired as an elementary librarian last Christmas. And so our baby, Delilah Ann, she's not our baby, but she's the best. She was born November 29th. And so we're 2 weeks away from her first birthday. So Beth has a head start. But I'll catch up. And so she's now getting to the point where I think she's about ready for ice cream. But no, I'll spend more time. And one of the true blessings of our life was that both of our kids had their mom around them a little bit in elementary school. But Shannon, our oldest, actually, I was her principal for all 4 years. And then I left Haley after her sophomore year to take the business job. So we were actively involved. And they were involved with us. They knew what was going on around the campus sometimes better than I did. But that was really neat to have them. But you know what it's like as an administrator. You miss some things.
Yep.
So now I'll have more time for them, even though they're 33 and 29. But that'll be fun. I'm also in discussions with the University of Laverne to do a few things with them. So it's not like I'll totally just walk away.
So you're going to stay around here? You're not going to move out of town?
We're not moving.
Good for you.
Well, the grandbaby's 4 miles from our front door.
You're
so
not going anywhere.
She changed any discussions about that.
Yeah, once that happens, it's over.
Yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it for us on the first ever Kern High School District podcast. Dr. Bryon Schaefer, 30 years of service. 39 years of service, 9 years as superintendent, and what a legacy he's going to leave behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.